What would you say to people who say, oh, I'm not going to bother to register to vote because my voice doesn't make a difference, or I'm just one person?
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you. Get off your ass and vote.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally.
I love it.
The lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway, restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you, working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA. I still see your face, buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away, working my way, coming back to you, working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Light on as I drive on, singing our song. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
All right, Robert, here we are. Welcome to What Are the Odds, folks, with Baris and Baris. Oh, man, I got a lot. And Robert, I got your stuff. I also got a lot of stuff. I have all of this, and I'm keeping it updated. But some people seen some of it on Inside the Numbers, but I'm like, when we do What Are the Odds, I got to bring this up, which, when you're talking about content, I'm like, this is exactly where I was going to go with this. Robert, we're asked to believe. All right. What we're asked to do is put aside decades and decades of predictive value with certain indicators. Put all of that aside, hinging on the belief that these polls, which have been wrong grossly, this is not a I'm so sick of people saying it's a 2016 problem. It's not a 2016 problem. It was before 2016. But let's just call it the last 4 cycles. They've been grossly wrong. They're the only things, the only one indicator that suggests Democrats are going to George W. Bush 2002 this puppy and buck the historic trend. I just can't take much more of it, Robert. It's asinine. It's asinine. Not opening thoughts, brother.
Yeah, 2 things. I mean, one, as 2018 really affirmed, the post 2004 electorate in the midterms is not like the pre 2004. Pre 2004, you had some real variability on whether midterms would swing heavily one direction or the other. And I remember we were discussing whether or not the 2004, back in 2018, did 2004 radically reshape, the big sort theory, which basically politics became personal, politics became cultural, politics became where you chose to live, where you went to church, where you went to school, who you invited to dinner, all of that the big sort predicted that 2004 began and sort of consolidated. Well, 2018 kind of answered that. I mean, since 2004, every presidential election has been close. Even 2008 was much closer than it logically would have been historically. You have an incumbent president, extremely unpopular, economy in the tank, financial scandal, war scandal, political scandal, a alternative that is praised as the second coming of the Messiah by the media. And yet he can't, and he's running against John, I can't raise my arms, McCain, who he can't even win by double digits.
That's an unfair statement, sir. That's an unfair statement.
Exactly.
North Carolina and Indiana by a hair, Robert. That's it, by a hair. So and Florida by 2.
Oh, correct. Look at 2004. Well, tight, all about turnout. 2012, tight, all about turnout. 2016, tight, all about turnout. 2020, tight, all about turnout in quotation marks.
Mm-hmm.
The given that, and then 2006, major swing. 2000 to the party out of power. 2010, major swing to the party out of power. 2014, major swing to the party out of power.
Yep.
2018, major swing to the party out of power. And then you add to that all the other models, which are based on presidential job approval, economy, inflation, war, all of these other issues. Everything screams Republican sweep in 2022. And I'm kind of glad that they're selling themselves an ad and buying themselves belief that they're not going to get crushed, because that reduces the risk of an October surprise, escalation with Russia even further, conflict, open war over Taiwan, some major event that they would think could re-script everything to get the rally around the flag effect. They're less likely to do that if they think like they do right now. And thank God for Nate Silver. Never first, always second. Nate Silver. Those guys, Decision Desk, reading them today. All of these crystal ball, if you look, all of them, what are they predicting? We're Democrats easily. Well, and we'll go into the predict it. I got my sports pick site up because that's where I'm going to put up political bets all year long. So far, already making money since August. Said Trump wasn't going to get indicted by September 1st. He wasn't. Said some other things were going to go a certain way. Some primary bets didn't go well, but some other bets did. But I've never gone an election season without making money. So you can get all those predictions there. But we'll break it down. They think Arizona's in the bag. Democrats think Georgia is still good for them. They do. Democrats still think they have a shot at Ohio. Democrats think they're going to steal Wisconsin. Democrats think that, weird, whatever his name is, John Frankenstein Fetterman there is going to win with ease in Pennsylvania. They think they even have maybe a shot at North Carolina, thanks to that North Carolina Supreme Court trying to do everything they did in the House. Doesn't matter in the Senate, but we'll see about that. They think I even got the Decision Desk headline today. Said maybe Democrats hold the House. They're still predicting Republicans win it, but it's getting closer and closer. And that Democrats easy re-election for governor in Pennsylvania, easy re-election in Wisconsin, easy re-election in Michigan. Probably will still pull it out and win in Arizona. That's why they don't even need to debate. And maybe Stacey Abrams will come through in Georgia and all those special votes you get pour out of the elections again. I'm glad they think that, because they're dead wrong.
Robert, I just polled, and it's funny because both of these states that I polled, and look, folks, I mean, I texted Robert the day I started polling there. It was 2 days into Nevada, and I'm like, Trump would carry every county in this state. He probably would, and he would carry Clark before he might carry Washoe. You know, he could lose Washoe by maybe a point and still carry Clark County by, you know, maybe 3, something like that, because of the shift in the Hispanic vote. But you have these, and John, you got to add John Ralston to this other one. He's like, this is basically a trash poll because if Adam Laxalt had a 20-point lead, he'd be up double digits. That he knows nothing about his own state that he's supposed to be an expert in. Dean Heller won modestly, yet he won independents by 21 points. It's like, can you read a damn exit poll? Republicans need to win independents by that kind of a margin because it means they're cutting into Hispanics. White vote is not enough. That's what you have to do. So it's just dumbest commentary on earth. We polled Wisconsin, one of the hardest states to poll in the country, a battleground state. And I, was listening to crap and hearing heat for hours until 12 hours. Emerson drops a Johnson +4, and which is, they are not that good in Wisconsin, folks. They're not good in the Midwest. They've understated Republican support dramatically in the Midwest. If you still think that Tim Ryan is going to beat J.D. Vance because of the Suffolk poll. The Suffolk poll had Biden beating, they took 2020 off. They had Richard Cordray beating Mike DeWine in 18, Robert, by 7 points in the state of Ohio. They had in 2016, Hillary Clinton, 7 points up over Donald Trump in Ohio. So for them to even throw their hat back in the ring after sitting out 2020 in Ohio is like just brass balls, brother. It's just brass balls. And I get a little upset with the Twitter followers who are like, hey, People's Pundit, what do you think of this poll in Wisconsin? I just polled Wisconsin. That's what I think about Wisconsin. It's like they have learned nothing, Robert, a lot of these people. Because I got to be honest with you, I hear a lot of like doom and gloom. Again, it's, I can see that we're making progress. It's just that I can't believe after all of these cycles, we're still dealing with some of these people that have this mentality. Here's Wisconsin. This is the gubernatorial vote preference. It's dead even. If Tim Michels is dead even right now, then Evers is going to lose. Okay, I mean, and I do not have a track record of overstating Democratic support significantly in the state of Wisconsin, nor the other way around, Robert. I am not R+ in Wisconsin. We actually, what did we have? I'd have to look it up. Biden by a point and a half in 2020.
You had Biden slightly more ahead than he won by.
I overestimated Biden. I overestimated him. Yet you can see these vote shares right here, and that's a lot of people just saying, I don't know yet. Here's the presidential rematch. Trump is beating him and by the way, see the line to the left? That's who's undecided, folks. Look who is undecided. This is what Robert and I try to explain to you people all the time. They're always going to be the post-grads who vote. They're always going to be. If you see Trump and Evers, and Michels, and then Ron Johnson, here's Ron Johnson. If you see them ahead, and yet all that's left remaining on the table are high school and less, or some college, a little bit more some college, and then independents, it tells you they're all working class independents. They're already breaking Republican by a big margin. It means Johnson's probably going to win by 5. He's not going to win by 3, by 4. I have by 3 here. He's probably going to win by 5. It's a first-term incumbent midterm. And guess what? In 2016, he pulled it out by just under 4. Not a single poll had Ron Johnson in the lead. Not one, Robert. A Loras College poll that was early had him up by 5. And then they did another poll right before the election, and they had him losing by 5 to what's his name? Russ Feingold. Yep. I mean, this is, and then I feel like it's a bit of the, what they say about the definition of insanity. That these people just keep doing this to themselves over and over again. That poll came out. Emerson came out. Trafalgar came out. Marquette actually even, because I heard it, I have this on good authority. Marquette heard we were in the field. So we pumped them into a Johnson +1. I have that on direct connection, good authority. They were like, oh, crap, that People's Pundit guy is going to whack us if we don't have Johnson up. He's like, if he has Johnson up, we're going to look stupid. Give Johnson a point. That's what happened at Marquette, the gold standard. All right, who they interview for Politico in a story about not being able to poll. It's like they haven't interviewed a single pollster who got anything right in these articles about, and that's how you know that they know they're full of crap. Democratic strategists in Arizona are having a heart attack, and they all agree that Kerry Lake is ahead and that Hobbs is a horrible candidate. Their only question right now is whether or not Kelly holds on to the tightening that they think is going to happen. And if Kerry really bludgeons Hobbs, will she pull, Masters along? That's what their mind is right now. And yet, after all those Wisconsin polls, Nate Silver, not 24, 48 hours later, publishes an article that says the polls are pretty good for Democrats in Wisconsin. I mean, they're doing the same things again, Robert.
I mean, usually with the polls, two good reminders for everybody out there. The first aspect is since 2014 in Senate races, which is our focus tonight, the average Democratic error, the average polling error and here's the thing, you can't rely on the aggregators because the aggregators include more reliable polls. So scrap those and look at apples to apples, not apples to apricots. And what you will find is you look at media polls, look at university polls, polling with the same method, because all of them haven't polled with the same method either. So polling the same method, what you will find is that the media and university polls since the 2014 election cycle in competitive races. Richard Hanania has a huge article about this on his Substack about all the problems in the polling and how they're incurable by the media and universities. But the average error rate in Senate races has been 7 points overstating Democratic performance. 7 points. So if I don't see margins of double digits from the university and media pollsters, the Democrats are in trouble. And the second part, and this is where there's been a lot of like Arizona is a classic example of this. So you have a governor's race that's open on both sides, no incumbent, competitive primaries on both sides. On the Senate race, you have an incumbent who didn't face any meaningful competition in Mark Kelly. You have an opposition, Blake Masters, that faced a very expensive primary campaign, who's completely new to the state of Arizona. When you have that, don't look at margin coming right out, because it's going to take a while for the unknown primary winner to consolidate his party base. And the incumbent has a little bit of a halo effect because he hasn't had to go through a contested competitive primary, and he's better known. What I look at is, are they over 50%? Is the incumbent already getting more than 50% support? Because then the challenger has a little bit of an uphill battle to eat away at that. Mark Kelly is not. And in a state like Arizona, where these media university polls on average have been off by 7 points, as an example, they've been way off in Ohio. One of our best one of our best bets in 2020 was 3 states, actually 4 states: Ohio, Florida, Texas, and Iowa. But Ohio was the biggest, easiest, quickest cash, because remember, they were expecting Trump to barely win in Ohio. He won again by almost double digits. I think it was 8 points, 8.5, whatever it was. It was not close. It's not competitive. J.D. Vance will crush Tim Ryan. Mitch McConnell's out there messing around, or Kevin McCarthy's out there messing around. These are the only hurdles to Republicans winning, is sabotage by the RNC.
It is sabotage. Yes.
But for the ordinary voter, everyday voter, they're just not going to vote for a Democratic Party that is incompetent and incapable in an electoral environment and recent historical trends that show when the economy is in terrible shape, as it currently is, when there's war overseas, when there's domestic scandal problems at home of a range of topics, and when we're in this post-2004 environment, there's a swing to the party out of power. And that's too powerful. And none of these candidates are so distinctly strong. Someone like Manchin could hold on in a great Democratic year in 2018 because he had in-depth support in parts of West Virginia, maybe mistakenly so. You can argue about that.
Gone now, but yeah.
Yeah. The what's his name? Tester in Montana, unique local support. Mark Kelly's not that guy. Fetterman's not that guy. These other, Warnock in Georgia's not that guy. So they can talk all they want about. Now, do I think all of these Republican candidates could be running better campaigns, including Blake Masters, including J.D. Vance, including Herschel Walker, obviously Dr. Oz, without question. I think Ron Johnson's running a pretty solid campaign. Johnson's
and his ads are fantastic now. They're fantastic. The one where he's sitting there watching the ads against him, and he's like, what? That is a great ad. I mean, it's so Wisconsin, isn't it?
Yes,
It's
yes,
so
it's very
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. And he made the smart move of being the leading voice, questioning the vaccines, questioning the vaccine mandates, questioning COVID policy, along with Rand Paul. And that has earned him a lot of goodwill amongst a lot of key voters in a state that people forget this is one of the most rural, big Midwestern states. Wisconsin's 2/3 small town.
That's
It's not a big city dominated state, unlike Minnesota, which is dominated by the Twin Cities. Unlike Michigan, which is dominated by Detroit and a few major cities. This is a rural, and that's the different dynamic. That's also what makes it tough to poll. And then you got the different.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. You got the Norwegians and the Danes and the Germans and the Irish and the Italians, and they all got different voting trends. That's why I got Kevin Phillips' emerging Republican majority behind me, which we're breaking down each week at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. So I look at this, all of them could be running better campaigns. My only main advice to them is the same thing I've been saying to Republican and we may provide a direct solution in future campaigns for this. There was some hope that other people would set up the option, but that's not happening quite clearly. But don't hire anybody who works in Washington D.C. Don't hire anybody that says that has a resume. If they got a big resume, you're screwed. That's I work for this candidate, this important person.
Let me say about that, Robert. You can see JD's email fundraising effort.
Did we lose Richard momentarily? I'll check in the chat. I didn't think that was that controversial. Or is that just on me? I mean, what all the candidates can do while we're... Are you back in?
Did I lose a second? Oh, no. Did I lose you? Zoom.
I just heard you.
Are you there still, Robert, or did I lose you?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I think you lost me.
I lost you.
I think you lost me. No, it was me, Robert. It was me. It was me. Yeah, what I was saying is JD Vance's fundraising apparatus, those emails, JD... Tell them to shut the hell up and stop panicking. You can't send out emails that say, if I don't raise, I'm getting creamed. And if I don't raise enough, I'm out. I'm going to quit the race. I mean, that's basically what they're writing in some of these emails. You can't do that. Here's the RNC spending. You were talking about sabotage. And this is the really only, what's the word? I guess
only
it's
cloud.
Like, yeah. We've never actually seen leaders try to sabotage their own candidates like this before. But McConnell is playing this game. Look at what he's doing to Blake Masters, okay, which everyone knows is getting bombarded by spending from Kelly and other Democratic line groups. They are finally now ramping up spending and outspending through the 5th to 26th. They outspent Democrats in basically every single battleground state in these races, except for Arizona. Florida, barely. I mean, folks, can I just say this right now? Florida's not competitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Marco Rubio is not in trouble.
We're not going to break it down tonight because it isn't. North Carolina is not competitive anymore. Neither one of those states is competitive.
Ted Budd, everybody knows in North Carolina, all the politicos, from Pitt to Mecklenburg. Everybody knows it's, and by the way, this is what pisses me off. I love the guys at the decision desk. I work well with them, but this is what pisses me off. One day, the same day, they're like, quietly talking or, having a conversation. Nobody believes Beasley has a chance. Bud is going to win by at least 5. And yet their model is like, this is close. It's basically a toss-up. 24 hours before they moved Walker's race, Georgia, to Lean's Democrat, which was insane. They jumped right over toss-up, and they went from lean Republican to lean Democrat. 24 hours before that, ladies and gentlemen, they were talking about the response bias in the summer that favors Democrats and makes them look like they're doing better. All right, and by the way, this is 2016 PA polling. In the beginning, like Robert was saying, Pat Toomey had a lead. It was generic. Nobody really knew who McGinty was. There was a primary going on. Then when the silly season came from August on, he lost the lead. Going into October, he was down double digits. Franklin and Marshall, McGinty plus 14 or some crazy shit. Look at this. It's superimposed over us. Look at September and October. Did it tighten at the end? No, ladies and gentlemen. It widened. Her average lead was 9.5 points in the state of Pennsylvania. She lost on election night pretty easily because Donald Trump did drag him over the finish line. But this is what I'm talking about, Robert. Look at the squiggly lines. People, I'm trying to explain to you. Throughout the summer, McGinty takes the lead. You can see it there, right? And sometimes they're pretty big leads. Then if you were that last lead at the end of July is when everyone, Robert, started like Mitch McConnell doing what he does best. Pull the firearm like a little Mary that he is, running around with his hands up, running over children. Get out of the building. There's a fire. Get out of the, running over little kids to get out, like, because that's the kind of cornball leader he is, the little Mary that he is. And, you know, Pat was one of them where he was like, save yourself, Pat, you're done. I can't help you. And he left Pat Toomey to flounder on his own. And if it wasn't for Donald Trump, maybe Toomey would have lost that race. Ron John, I think he just won that. He's maybe the only senator who you can claim won that race on his own. And he never abandoned Trump, Ron Johnson. He never said it. He was like, look, we ride together, we die together. And he won by, comfortable almost 4 points. But you see, this is the wild card here. You do see with the spending, what they're doing to Blake Masters. And what's a travesty on all this is when we polled Arizona, and we're polling it again for CD Media, Masters was like barely down. It was 3 point something. And there was still a large chunk of undecided. 70% combined of the undecided disapproved, including over 50% who strongly disapproved. Actually, it was 60 and another almost like 9%, something like that, somewhat disapproved of the job Joe Biden was doing. Robert, for the record here, how many first-term incumbent midterms has there been in the history of modern electoral politics where those people voted for the president's party?
It just doesn't happen.
Zero. You can't find a single one.
Even in the big Democratic year of 2018, I made bets, big bets that Republicans would add Senate seats. And that bet won, that they would add at least 2 Senate seats. It was a big underdog bet. It cashed over in London. And the reason was, if you looked at where those elections were being held, North Dakota, Montana, Florida, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri. And Ohio, we didn't field a meaningful competitor for dumb reasons.
Jim was not there.
Another story for another day. But in Indiana, we did. In Missouri, we did. In Florida, we did. In North Dakota, we did. And polls were showing all the way through up until late that Democrats were going to hold those seats, including Fox News polls. People forget.
Joe Donnelly plus 7. Plus 7.
Yeah. Anyway, it wasn't close. I mean, it was money in the bank. I had to wait a little while for them to count the Florida votes, and Arizona was tight. And that's it. You look at some of these states. Florida is moving in a certain direction; it's not competitive. North Carolina is moving in a Trumpish MAGA direction; it's not competitive. Ohio is already in the Trump camp; it's not competitive. So the only races, I don't think Wisconsin will end up being that competitive. It's not South Africa; they're not voting for the guy named Nelson or Mandela or whatever it is, Mandela Barnes, whatever. He's got my last name. People are asking, is he related? No, he's not related. Mandela Barnes is not related to me. That, the commie from Madison, that's what that comes across as to the rest of Wisconsin. When they see your name is Mandela Barnes, they're like, you're from Madison. And
your handle is the other Mandela or something. Are you kidding me? You think you're going to win Wisconsin like that? Here's Florida, ladies and gentlemen. Mitch McConnell just threw $5 million because they fall for this crap every time. In 2020, we were telling them, what are you talking about? You're going to lose 15 seats. Remember, when you hear Cook and you hear Decision Desk and you hear all the others, they all believed in 2020 that Democrats were ahead on the generic ballot by 7.5 points and that they were going to pick up at least 15 seats. At least. What happened? They net lost 15 seats, and they didn't even win half that on the generic ballot. Not half, Robert. Not half. By the way, Democrats lost a point this week on the generic ballot because there were more likely voter polls. And our buddy Sean Trendy was arguing 2 weeks ago. And it was a direct response to me complaining about Labor Day is that natural pivot to the likely voter model. If you're not going to use a likely voter model, you're not a real pollster. and you should stop polling because it's a cop-out. Your job, 80% of the job, Robert, is to predict who the hell votes. 20% is how these people are going to vote. That's the easy part. The hard part, or the easier part, the hard part is determining who is going to come out. And when the likely voter models were being held back, I knew what they were doing. And you could see it in the ABC Washington Post poll. You think they wanted to drop a Republican +5? That's the Biden +17 Wisconsin poll, ladies and gentlemen. It's +17. It's like I laugh, but I can't believe we're here again. I have to show them this chart of Florida. This is Florida Republicans have never outnumbered Florida Democrats. Never. Until that change happened under Trump, it started to exacerbate. And then just after Trump, they took a lead. There are now more Hispanics in Miami-Dade registered as Republicans than there are of Democrats, ladies and gentlemen. Florida is not competitive. And then here's the rest, Robert, because you mentioned Arizona. Arizona and Georgia are two states we could argue we're moving away from Republicans in registrations under Trump. But now, since the 2020 election, as of September 13th, because that was the final, I did this on the 13th and there was no more updates in Arizona beyond that point. Republicans netted almost 20,000. Most of that overwhelmingly came from Maricopa. So now we're back to an R plus nearly 5 statewide registration advantage for Republicans in Arizona, and Maricopa's R plus almost 4. So it was all the way down to R plus 1.5 under Trump in Maricopa. And yet he's still barely, I'm not going to get into it. We're on YouTube. Still barely lost it. Look at Florida, brother. Look at Florida. Look at Nevada. It's a small state. 40,000 net shift is freaking huge. Huge. And it ain't white. All right? Let me just explain that to people too. It's like some schmuck from the Las Vegas Journal Review or whatever that is. He's like, in no universe does this poll make sense. If independents are that much for Adam Laxalt, then he would have a much bigger lead. It does if the independents aren't as white. Jackass. It's basic arithmetic. It's done on market site. It's like, this doesn't really add up. It's computerized, jackass. All right. You want to go argue with the numbers? I'm not free-handing it anymore. It ain't 2014 anymore, for crying out loud. You can check and double check the math. They're all on these things called columns, right? And in each column, there's a total count. In each row of those columns, there's percentages. You can do some basic arithmetic to find out how you got there. And by the way, look at Robert. I was pretty, you mentioned how rural Wisconsin is. I was pretty happy with this. This is the distribution in our poll in Wisconsin. It was not that bad. You got a lot of Ashland, Polk, all those areas that are incredibly difficult to reach. Not bad at all. Not bad. So I was very confident. And by the way, he's leading him, like 54-41 or something. I mean, it's like this race is over. I hate to say I don't want to proclaim it, but Ron Johnson had a 2-point lead in our 2016 polling, and he wasn't that strong. It wasn't that deep of a lead. This was really deep.
Oh, no
this
doubt.
Was look at the Northwest, right below Ashland, right south of Ashland and Bay, killing it like a Trump margin.
Well, it relates to the broader trends. Two of the trends I like to follow are the voter registrations and 3, I should say: voter registration, primary participation,
primary vote share,
and political affiliation. All in these key states are trending heavily Republican. That the party in terms of voter registration, as Richard just went through, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, all the states where we have party registration, not all states do, overwhelmingly trend Republican. And if you do a deeper dive into it, it's 2 main constituencies. Working class whites continue to increasingly shift their partisan affiliation, particularly ancestrally Democratic working class white groups are shifting into Republican registration. The second, though, equally important, that the media occasionally, sporadically talks about, but then conveniently forgets because it goes so much against their general narrative, is the continued shift amongst Latinos, amongst Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Venezuelans, Cubans. This group continues to trend massively Republican. by like 20, 30 points kind of shift. And that's what's all of a sudden making Texas no longer competitive from a Democratic perspective. Where's all the Beto hype this time around, right? There's none of it. They know he's going to get crushed. The same and that's what makes Nevada and Arizona different. Nevada and Arizona were states that were trending Democratic because of the Mexican-American vote. That vote is now shifting dramatically Republican in trend. I mean, it'll still be net Democratic, but not the kind of margins they have to get to offset the losses in other groups in the state. And in Nevada, the hardest group to poll are Asian voters. It's always tricky to get them, but the better way to track is to track independent voters. And in fact, independent voters have often gone 20 plus points for one side or the other when there's been a big swing in the state. That's the nature of the independent voter here. So there's a low representation of college upper middle class whites in Nevada. So they depend on Latinos and they depend on the independent vote amongst Latinos and Asians. Filipinos in particular, we have certain Asian groups here. Those are groups under Obama were trending very Democratic. Under Trump, they trended the opposite direction. And now, of course, also in Nevada, black turnout tends to be abysmal in midterms. The reality is the only time they really turned out is when you had the unique mail-in election of 2020, and otherwise when Obama was on the ticket. When it's not North Las Vegas, just where the heavily concentrated African-American vote here is in Nevada, doesn't turn out very much. We're still making, still losing a bit in places like Reno, but making it up in places like Clark County. And the rural parts of the state are massively trending Republican. Laxalt has been very strong from day one. What's her name? I won't even pronounce her name. The incumbent's not very strong.
Cortez Masto. Yeah.
That's it. Anyway, why? I mean, Nevadans shouldn't vote for somebody with two last names anyway. But but putting that aside, even though I'm not a big fan of Sheriff Joe, because Lombardo, because of how he presided over the Vegas shooting, other things, he's still an improvement over Sisolak, who was atrocious. Democrats made a major mistake in Nevada when they endorsed wokeism and when they endorsed shutting down the economy. This is a state that depends on tourism. They got to see what Vegas looks like when that doesn't happen. And when they only partially reopened, what they got was, frankly, a bunch of folks from, let's say, less desirable parts of America came here. And people were like, whoa. And all of a sudden, homelessness surged. Homeless is still a problem on the Strip now. Didn't used to be. They actually live underground here. Yeah. A whole other story. But the crime started to spike here, and crime on the Strip, and crime, and you couldn't even, locals wouldn't even go to the downtown Strip casinos, and they were having to, places like the Wynn were having to impose security and clearance to make sure you weren't armed because of the kind of crowd that was coming in here. That was the only crowd let in early after the lockdown. All these things have backfired. Working class Mexican Americans are economically populist, and sometimes that's Bernie-style left populist. That's Bernie's base in the Democratic primaries in 2020 was the Mexican-American vote, even more than the millennial vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But culturally, they're cowboys. Culturally, they are not a bunch of wokesters. They don't have Brokeback Mountain on record. This is not Mexican culture. So this is boxing culture. This is machismo. Yeah. It's a Spanish word for a reason. And they like Trump's machismo. I mean, I recognize this because I have family friends that are Mexican-American, first-generation Mexican-American. They hated Trump in 2016. In 2020, they're all becoming Trump fans. And I was like, what is going on? And it's this Mexican-American culture embraced MAGA culture. And so that's why Democrats are in deep trouble. These Democratic, like one of the smart moves, there's been a lot of political incompetence by all these candidates. Hire more outsiders, everybody. Hire more outsiders, hire more people that have a record of success, not a record of being in D.C. But one of the good things was ask your opponent. That's why they don't want to do debates in every race. Can you tell me is a woman and is a man a man? And
simple. Very simple.
When you can't answer that, you're going to lose Mexican-American voters. You're going to lose Filipino voters. You're going to lose Korean voters. These are voters, there's a reason why they call them rooftop Koreans. These are not pro-crime, socially liberal, wokester groups, and they see the economy as a shit show, and they see a president who keeps sending money to that cokehead in Kiev. So this is not, they're not.
Robert, do you think they did this to Nordstrom too? I got it because I got to play this. Let me play this clip. Yeah. Let me play this clip. All right, and I'm gonna just superimpose it over us real quick. I don't want to get too far off, guys. Trust me, we'll circle back to elections. But this was Biden before the conflict in Ukraine.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
You know what I used to love about Donald Trump? He would be like, "Listen, I'm not telling you, but I'll tell you right now, something's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen." He never just said it like an idiot. Now Putin can go to the UN if, God forbid, something happens. God knows what's going to happen with that pipeline. God knows what's going to, or with the, the environment. Who knows what they did? We just don't know enough yet. But Robert, if we created some kind of significant crisis, it's going to be our ass on the line here. He's going to have it hook, line, and sinker. He walked right into a trap. Right? He really did this over his son's shale deposit friends in eastern Ukraine. This is unbelievable that he did this. He gave Putin a pretext. He gave him a pretext.
It's also just insane.
President ever.
It's a complete lack of control. And the problem was, we talked about the time, whatever you think about
Robert.
Yeah, whatever you think about
the room.
Exactly. Whatever you think about the war, this was not going to be domestically popular over time. Not in Europe, as we've seen with the Italian elections, the collapse of the Swedish government, Macron losing a majority in the parliament, so on. And Germany, Scholz is on the cusp of getting knocked out. Hungary is now going to have a referendum on whether or not these sanctions should move forward. They're not scheduling that referendum because they think people are going to vote for it, folks. Just FYI. While Russia is doing its referendum using our Balkans example to establish power. And so all these things are unpopular. Foreign wars are unpopular. They have almost invariably been unpopular. Outside of the peak of the very beginning of the conflict, after that, they're unpopular. And so here you have a president who's clearly incompetent, incapable, walking, talking dementia candidate. Approval rating, even with inflated, manipulated polls, in the 30s. His honest approval rating is probably low 30s, high 20s amongst likely voters. And one of the giveaways in all of this was that the institutional media will always usually do one accurate poll in the fall, so they can point back to it later and say, "Oh no, we actually got it right. We
weren't that bad."
Yeah. When ABC came out and it was +5 likely voters, I was like, "That's it. End of story. It's going to be +5. It's going. I mean, right now I think it's +3. But what you're pointing out is undecided voters are going to break one way. They don't like Biden. They're unhappy with the economy. They don't want anything to do with wokeism. And the underlying demographic problems they have is Democrats have done nothing to salvage their support amongst working class white voters. They're bleeding badly amongst Mexican American working class independent voters and Asian American working class voters. And last but not least, the one place they were making major headway, middle class suburbia in middle America, places like the Wow counties in Wisconsin, places like the suburbs of Kansas City, places like the suburbs of Dallas, Fort Worth, places like parts of the suburban Florida. They're losing because they decided to do woke nonsense in schools. And credit to Christopher Rufo, credit to James Lindsay.
Groceries and grooming, Robert. Groceries and grooming.
Nobody wants, they just did it in my hometown in Chattanooga. They snuck in, some tranny teaching lesson for little kids. Nobody wants your elementary school teacher talking about their sex life to their 6-year-old child. Nobody wants women dressed up as men, prosthetic boobs or not, showing up around, hanging around the school. They don't want this. Nobody wants men to pretend they're women. Nobody wants men participating and competing in women's sports. Nobody wants this cultural crap that's happening all over Disney and Marvel and the rest that's being shoved down kids' throats. Nobody wants to be taught that they should hate themselves because of the color of their skin or their ancestry, or bogus interpretations of their history. Going after schools was a brilliant move on the Republican side, conservative side, the right side, exposing how nuts the Democrats are, because that hit middle-class moms exactly where it matters most. Their number one priority, how their kid is being taken care of. So all of a sudden, those wonderful Democratic trends from a Democratic perspective in places like suburban Dallas, for example, suburban Atlanta, for example, suburban Charlotte, for example.
There are even places in southeastern Pennsylvania. I pulled
absolutely,
statewide,
parts of
and
Philly.
I pulled a district. I pulled a district that encompasses
they're heavily
Philly,
Italian.
Montgomery.
Look at their
And I'm
ancestry.
telling you-
They're Italian. The Italians back home just put in the most right-leaning government they've had since a person won't be named. I mean, so it was so that's a message. The Italians are pissed. I knew that when I was over in Italy. I mean, I was in liberal towns, labor towns, ex-commie towns, and they would complain about immigration over and over again. And why? They were taking over the center of places like Venice. They were taking over the local stores in places like Florence. I won't use the language they use because I was like, "Whoa, that's politically incorrect even by my term." They're like, "No,
even by my standards."
I was like, "Whoa, hold on a second. Yeah, it's still not supposed to put it that way." But these were in lefty town. I was like, "Okay, immigration is a problem in Italy." And culturally similar.
Sweden too.
The reason why she won
everybody
yesterday,
said it.
I don't think she'll make great changes. But what is South Philly? What is Philadelphia? What is one of the biggest demographic groups in Philly? It's Italians. So you had middle-class suburban Italian moms, a decent number of them that the Democratic Party was able to pick off because of Trump's mean tweets and so on and so forth. And now they find out there's commies in their local public school district dressing up as boys, boys dressing up as girls, wanting to convince their kids they should get gender transition surgery.
Hugging up on their 12-year-old.
And if they want to send them to the local, and that their local hospital is doing these things, and a lot of them are being done in secret. And then you combine the vaccine mandates with all the rest, with all the craziness. We now see that the shutting down schools was a disaster, a debacle. Democratic statism has been on full display now for 2 years, arguably longer than that because of the lockdown politics in these Democratic cities, counties, and states. They're also seeing it with Democratic DAs. I mean, everybody can turn on and see live who's raiding the local drugstore now, for local grocery store, the local market, for just taking stuff right out. I mean, it looks like Escape from New York, except it's modern day downtown San Francisco. And
go ahead.
So I was going the last group they had hope for, the group they thought would turn out at a disparate rate because they tend to always turn out in elections, upper middle class suburban voters, they're losing because of crime and wokeness in schools. And that's the final. That's why I think Republicans will win by 5 or more. I think they'll pick up, be over 240, may break 250 House seats. We'll break that down. We do the House races next week. And
if
I
ABC's right, Robert, they're going to crush that 247 roof. They're gonna 21 points in competitive folks.
That was ABC. For those people who don't know.
Seat. Yeah, for people who don't know, that's ABC News. And just so we can, I just want to point something out here before I ran off to another slide, but I wanted to point out why this does matter. And people were like, really seriously arguing with me that it didn't matter. It does matter, whether it's registered or likely voter. You'll notice that the polls that came out earlier in the month, Harvard Harris, they should be ashamed of themselves. September 8th, they're still in a registered voter poll, and they barely squeeze out a Democrat lead. They should be ashamed. And then Trafalgar and Roberts just like, the hell with you. I polled the same time, but I'm doing likely voters. Republicans have a 6-point lead. The New York Times, Sienna, Nate Cohen is just a total chump. He's a total chump. For those who don't remember, Robert and I were very critical of him during 2020. He called every single state wrong. Iowa, Ohio included. Florida, Biden +4, some ridiculous poll. All right, North Carolina, Biden +6 or something. He called and by the way, folks, when you see the BZ polls, nobody has called North Carolina in media and university polls for 10 years. They haven't been accurate in North Carolina since 2012. That would be 10 freaking years. But you have Fox News, who's just garbage. Democrats +3. NBC News, also registered voter. Their pollster doesn't even wait for education. They had it tied. But Political Morning Consult and YouGov shouldn't even be in these averages, Robert. I mean, the Democrat +5s, They're so bad. They're not even verifiable voter polls. Those are consumer panel surveys. They're garbage. And I don't care what they say. Well, no, they are registered voters. We asked them. Good for you. It's a consumer sourced data set. It's trash. ABC News and the Washington Post, they dropped this first likely voter since the Trafalgar, which was Republican +6. By the way, Rasmussen during this entire time was between 2 and 5 for Republicans. And then that ABC News one broke. It mirrors Trafalgar. Rasmussen goes back from, or it was 1 to 5, and Rasmussen goes back from 1 to Republican +2. Emerson was tied. CBS News, the Battleground Tracker, Republican +1, because of these likely voters. If RCP dropped out old garbage from the average, which they need to do at this point, it's now September 27th. If they dropped out old garbage, Republicans would have a kind of sizable lead because of the ABC News poll. Robert, that the lead was buried in that poll, and they didn't even want to print their own lead. If Republicans have a 21-point lead in the districts that are identified combined as competitive, which if you look over, guys, there are some, we're not just talking about the 34 toss-ups, guys. We're talking about leans in there as well. Competitive districts they were talking about were lean districts in addition to competitive. And overall, it's about 40-something seats or 40 seats, right? Robert, if they have a 21-point lead in on average, in those districts, this is a wipeout. This is a wipeout coming. Right. That's exactly. A wipeout. I'd like to see if others get the same.
And that's a good transition into like one of the only issues I'm seeing critical of a lot of the Republican candidates. While some could have run better campaigns to date, and I still favor outsiders, et cetera.
Me too, I believe that.
Use more creative pollsters, use more creative media people. Don't get locked into the classic political consultants. Don't look for people with experience, quote unquote. Look at people who are skilled, who've shown and demonstrated that skill in the applicable context. And that's where they can improve, and they can all upgrade their capabilities. But what I'm skeptical of is the idea that either incumbency or massive media budgeting makes a difference much anymore in races that are national races. Effectively, the House races have been nationalized. The Senate races have been nationalized. I think even the gubernatorial races. Well, what we saw,
that's the toughest one to nationalize.
I know. What did we see in 2021? The Republicans picked up more gain in New Jersey, where there was no money spent on that guy, as far as I know.
They bailed on Pat Citarelli. They bailed on him.
If they would have spent a little bit more money,
He would have been governor right now. He would have been governor right now if they would have spent a little bit of money in northern New Jersey. Definitely the Bergen media market. They would have painted that, Robert, not even much, I mean, throw $5 million in the race. Throw $5 million in the race, you cheap SOBs. They aren't even helping Doug Mastriano either.
Exactly.
They're doing the same thing to Doug.
Yeah, they are. They just assume that money, that there wasn't enough money to compete, and that the incumbency effect and other effect was too strong, and they were wrong. I mean, I saw that in 2018, and I mean, it used to be the effect. You go back 2014, 2010, definitely 2006, but even in 2014, there were a bunch of Democrats that still held on in Republican seats. Who are incumbent. There was an incumbency gap. If someone was an incumbent, they ran 5-6 points better than did an open seat candidate in a similar race compared to the national norm. That changed in 2018, and it's continued. I think incumbency no longer carries much weight. I think so. That means people like Mark Kelly, people like Warnock are not in the same position that people think they are. And I think the same is true in terms of the money. I mean, I think as long as Masters spends enough, it won't matter if they spend double, triple, quadruple, quintuple. We've seen too many of these elections now. I mean, Hillary way outspent Trump. It didn't matter. In a race where they're voting more on the national party and the national political environment, which is what's been happening since 2018 at least, arguably since 2014. Remember Virginia? Gillespie is supposed to be completely blown out. Warner is supposed to win with ease.
He was up by 7 to 13 points in the polls. 7. I was just looking at that race the other day, Robert.
17 points ahead. And then on election night, it's within an eyelash.
3,400 votes that and Bob, that was Bob Beckel's famous moment.
Yes,
we're
exactly.
gonna find the votes. He was all high. He
Yep.
slipped. He slipped. He had
Yep.
one too many oxys that night, and he slipped. And for those who I don't have the clip handy, but man, oh man, I wish I did. Yeah, by the way, I guess Rumble is down. Just so people, I want to address this.
We're also up on YouTube, so you can watch us there.
We're on YouTube, Twitter, Getter. So for those of you who are on, because it did look like there was like this big jump to YouTube real quick. And I guess that's probably why. Speaking of which, though, Robert, bear with me for 1 second while I do my read. Okay, I have my reads. Now a word from our sponsor reads, and it's kind of funny because it's not funny at all. The hurricane, my old man's going to be trapped in it. He'll be fine. We're always fine. We're preppers, but it does look like the Euro model's got it going right over our Florida hometown. So it looks like it is what it is. But this is why we started actually purchasing this stuff. And when you learn when you're in hurricanes. And, you want to call me a prepper? That's fair. Because I'm not going to be the sucker who's not eating comfortably, who's not sleeping comfortably. I've been through too many of them and I know what time it is, right? Plus, it's not just hurricanes and weather stuff anymore. This is the Biden administration. All right. So,
lockdowns educated everybody on the need to have a backup plan.
You got to have a backup plan, so which is why, by the way, you got drought, you got weather, you got inflation, even government policies, folks, are definitely pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important than ever. Like Laura and I, create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots food kits. It's not ordinary food, Robert. This stuff lasts 25 years. Hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the USA. They're compact, sturdy, water resistant, and light resistant. They stack very easily right in your closet. That's what we do. They have delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners. You can make these meals in 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP to get your 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Again, 4patriots.com/TPP for the People's Pundit to build your own stockpile like Laura and I today. And if you happen to be surfing around their website, which, I do quite frequently, speaking of storms, they got generators, solar power generators. Mine is natural gas. I'm about to retrofit that puppy with a solar power. Before you check out, I did this for you guys who were emailing me. Promo code TPP10 to get 10% off your entire order. TPP for the People's Pundit.
Just TPP.
TPP. Thomas Peter Beater. All right. TPP 10. 10, the number 10.
Oh, 10, the number 10.
Yeah.
So Thomas, Peter, Paul, 10.
Yep. And I'll tell you, man, they're delicious. Like, that's why I did get, you can get all different kinds of like times for the survival kits, but I did get a bunch of the 3 months. I got them over time. I got one, then I got another, because there are more different kinds of meals. And especially if you got kids, man, you better entertain them during when the lights are off, man. They can be the biggest pains in the asses. I love them to death, but God, take a cup of hot cocoa and go chill out in the other room, and water. Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, I don't even care. People call me a prepper. Damn right. It's called prepper for prepared. I will be prepared. And you know what? I'm not that cocoa pad. That's a bottle of penicillin right there. When you're bartering,
Right.
Rob, that's a damn paper cut could kill your ass during a real extreme situation. You need a bottle of penicillin, sure. Cup of coffee. That's it. So there it is. I got to get into this abortion thing too, man, because again, poll just
the mythology. It's like I saw a decision desk.
This is crazy.
Narrative that the abortion decision changed everything. Democrats are surging. Now they're going to hold the Senate. Now they're going to hold the governorships. Now they're going to be real close in the House. And it's like, this is mythical. I get, congrats to them in Kansas. They got out the vote in Kansas. But that was about it. You looked at everywhere else afterwards, as was being tracked by a range of people as party. I mean, the place where this would show up is party registration, party primary turnout, and participation. It didn't. Outside of a
It
few
did.
states, the overwhelmingly Republican trend that was happening before the Roe was reversed continued after Roe was reversed.
Wisconsin, Wyoming, and they want to keep using New York 19. New York 19, very strange situation there. Molinaro was a victim of narrative war. Where that was a Delgado plus 12 seat, Robert, and he barely lost it. That was still a net roughly 12-point swing. He crushed it in Dutchess County. Their problem was, and I know this because I know what the campaign was struggling with. Republicans didn't realize there was even a special election there because there was only one primary in one area of Dutchess. That's it for Republicans. The rest of it was Democratic primary, and that was it. So they had no real reason outside of that to participate, and a lot of people didn't even know whether or not they were still in the old district or were they in the new district. They didn't realize it, and Republicans, that's one thing they admit. They didn't do a good enough job getting it out. Now, New York 23, people are like, well, what about that one? And I even myself said that was a red flag to me, but it wasn't for the reasons they're saying. The red flag is that turnout is very disproportionately higher in areas where Trump is involved, where Trump gets involved and backs a candidate. There was a big differential there. And what I was saying is that I'm worried that Republicans are not going to be able to move on from Trump. Some of these Republicans think they are, and they're not. It's like they remind me of an 18-year-old who thinks they're ready to leave the house, but then after 2 months, they have to come back home to daddy because they can't take care of themselves. You know where this is going to show up too, Robert? In those places we were just talking about where that Hispanic shift is especially prevalent. Nevada's one of them. No, this one guy in Clark County, and he did vote for Biden, but he was like, I don't know, I screwed up. I wasn't really important to me. He was kind of like laying it on me. And he's like, but I'll tell you what, man. And by the way, I looked it up afterwards. Inflation is double the nation in that state. So he's like, look, I got to deal with inflation eating up my paycheck. He's like, I don't have time to learn all these new freaking pronouns or to make sure that I don't, offend someone because I dead named them or issued the wrong gender. He's like, I don't give a damn about any of that. He's like, I'm trying to get the, using culinary business. This is the way it is by issue in Nevada. All right. Cost of living and inflation was number one, 27% cited it. Republicans were a third of that, 16% Democrats, and actually a tenth of a point more was independent. And then economy and jobs, there was almost twice as many independents who said that than Republicans, and only 8.9% of Democrats who did. Look at abortion, Robert. Look at abortion. It's all Democratic. It's all Democrat. Independents don't give a rat's you know what. As a matter of fact, statistically speaking, the same amount of independents cited immigration and border security as they did abortion. And Adam Laxalt has leads with the first 5 issues. So this is, to me, and election integrity was number 5. I mean, this is like, and gun rights was number 6. I mean, this is crazy to me that somehow they're going to win an overall margin with the one issue that falls in the top, let's say 5, because in the ABC poll, it was a distant number 5, right? In that ABC News poll. In my national polling, it's the same thing. I'll pull it up right now. Oh, I went back a slide, but give me a second. I'll pull it up right now. It's all being driven by, and abortion was number 3, but it's a distant number 3 because half cited economic reasons. And again, it wasn't driven, Robert, by like all voters. It was driven by Democrats, so you can see it clear as day. And again, same thing, immigration and border security, statistically the same as those who said abortion, and slightly more independents chose immigration and border security than chose abortion. It's friggin' 50% of the electorate chose an economic issue. 50%. And it's more than that when it's 60% if you look at independents alone. I mean, this is nuts. And because they're going to, they have a lead, Robert, with one. Let me try to understand what they're trying to tell us here. Because they have a lead with one top 5 issue and the rest they're getting just crushed on. They're going to buck, 65 years of modern midterm history? This is crazy, man. This is crazy. This is really a new low for the forecasting crowd to try to convince people a first-term incumbent midterm with an unpopular president is going to be good for his party.
Especially in
Ladies and gentlemen, snap out of it. God.
Especially in the post-2004 electoral environment, with the global context that the economy is bad, crime is bad, immigration is bad, wokeism is bad, scandal is rampant, war is raging.
World's falling apart. Yeah.
These are, institutional factors. Even there was a lefty guy who admitted that the model that he has used that's been successful predicts a Republican sweep.
That in Larry Sabato's crystal ball. They put up two things. Even with the polls in the historic model, it's still a Republican route. Still. Yep. And he puts it where? On like a blog. And he doesn't mention it at all in any of his commentary or when he goes on TV.
Yeah. I mean, the net effect is that it's deluding them into believing they're safer and stronger than they are. So they're less likely to pull a precarious October surprise. I think Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Ohio are Republican sweeps. I think despite some of the unique issues that Oz has in Pennsylvania because of how he's decided to run his campaign, both during the primary and the general, the reality is, Uncle Fetterman there is not going anywhere. The guy looks like Uncle Fester or whatever. The dude from
there's something seriously wrong with that man.
Oh, the guy's got the hunchback growing out of his back. The dude, he had a stroke, probably from the vaccine. And you hear him up there talking. He's going, the guy is, I was like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, whatever Oz's problems are, it doesn't compare to this guy. So I think Oz is going to win in Pennsylvania too. And I think the only real question to me is whether there's a surprise somewhere. Do Republicans pull a surprise in New Hampshire? Do they pull a surprise in Colorado? Do they pull a surprise in Washington? Those are the places that I'm watching. And could they beat Murkowski in Alaska? I think that's the more interesting dynamic because I think for those people out there, my bets are still, given the current odds, whether you're Predict It or you're overseas and you have access to Betfair, which is a better betting market, Republicans pick up at least 2 net seats in the Senate and will win the Senate. Pick up at least 40 net seats and will be over 240 in the House. But will easily, my view is 95, 96% chance Republicans take the House, 2/3 chance they take the Senate. I would favor Walker in Georgia, Vance in Ohio, Johnson in Wisconsin, and I think they will sweep Nevada, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. I think Laxalt wins easier than people expect. Arizona is going to be close because it's like old Florida. It's like Florida pre-2020.
Yeah, like 06. Yeah, like it's like an 06.
Arizona was close. Arizona was even close in 2018. When people keep telling me it's a Democratic, easy, I was like, well, I don't know what people are. It's been 3 to 4 points more Republican than the national average in almost every election in the last 3 cycles. So all Masters got to do is run a competent campaign in October, have enough money, put up enough ads to just get his voice out there to people who don't know who he is right now. That's it.
You think the monkey comment is gonna? You think because I'm gonna poll it again soon for CD Media. We're going back in Arizona. You think that monkey comment hurt? I think that monkey comment probably hurt Mark Kelly.
It wasn't well advised, obviously.
Honestly, Robert, Rodrigo. It is what they think. The most racist person in the country, Robert, is a limousine liberal like Mark Kelly. And for those of us who are like you and I.
We've all been in their car. As soon as they see certain color people outside, people of a certain color outside the door, they hit the lock. They always hit the lock button, right? They feel bad about it.
Scoot over in the elevator. Scoot over in the elevator. And Robert and I know this, folks, because we were raised in working class areas and then worked, were in life. I mean, Robert, you went to Yale with Sean Trendy. I mean, we've been in these areas where like these metro, it was Manhattan, with Robert, he had his own experiences. And we got to compare the part of the country that they say is racist with them. And there's without a doubt. And who said it? Moynihan. The bigotry of low expectations. It's not outwardly racist, like they throw a hood on and burn a cross in a yard. It's worse. It's this bigotry of low expectations. So Mark Kelly would say, my brother, if he was in space too long and his DNA is altered, it's gotten so bad we had to release him back into the wild, and we now call him Rodrigo. This is the stuff, like, this is what they think. And the reason why he said it so comfortably is because whether Mark Kelly will openly admit it to the Arizona Central or not, he looks down on brown people. He does. They have this feeling, folks, that they'll tell you in public it's like a lack of opportunity, and they don't really believe that. They think there's like something, they're not as smart. That's why Joe Biden could say, make a comment like, black kids could be just as smart. Like he had to force himself to say something like that, and it shows you what they really think, which is that there's something inherently wrong with the DNA of these folks, and there's always, or whatever it may be. Even if they truly believe it was their experience, Robert, they still think it's based on color. And that's what their problem is. And I got a net 2 here as well. I just wanted to point out that the RCP current Senate polling forecast as of the 12th, when I first did this, 8 states were toss-ups. 4 of them were held by Republicans, 4 held by Democrats. But in only 2 of the 8 toss-up states, New Hampshire and Georgia, has public polling not significantly understated Republican support in at least 3 of the last 4 election cycles. And that gets into the average error Robert and I were trying to explain to you guys before. In Ohio, those errors have been huge, double digits. Wisconsin, again, Ron Johnson never led. I just showed you the polling in PA. There it is again. It's superimposed over the whole damn screen. Pat Toomey was down to McGinty by double digits. You think Fetterman's 7-point lead that came out today is a big deal? Let's try being Pat Toomey for the month of October. It was egregious. 11 points down, 13 points down. Franklin and Marshall, 14 points down, right? They were supposedly the gold standard, like Marquette is supposedly the gold standard in Wisconsin. Franklin and Marshall were perceived at that time to be the gold standard in Pennsylvania, even though Robert and I have been saying for years they couldn't poll for their lives. Florida, not competitive. North Carolina is a toss-up on their map. It really, if you go to mine, which still had Arizona leans blue, but that was because of that time during the polling average. There's a little bit of a hiccup in the data there, though, Robert. At the end in 2018, it actually tricks you a little bit if you don't look back at the entire history of the polling. Because McSally took a lead in the Real Clear Politics average at the very end because of some polls that had her up by, a little bit outside the sampling error. And it gave her like a 1-point-something lead. But the whole month of September and October, she was getting bludgeoned by Fox News polls that had her down 13 points. So it may not be the case that Arizona shouldn't also be lumped in there. Because look, in 2020, they overstated Joe Biden's support horrifically. I mean, we overstated Trump, according to the official results. We overstated Trump by about 1.5 points, but they were overstating Biden by like 4 and 5 points. So technically, Masters probably is within at least the most recent era, right?
Oh yeah. And my view was he was going to take a little while. He would surge late. One, because Arizona's very competitive. Second, he's running against an incumbent who had no meaningfully contested primary, is better well known.
Huge war.
And third, he went through a contested primary as an unknown candidate. You combine that, and he's money getting crushed in September. So you combine those 4 things, you're not expecting him to surge until October. I was only concerned if Kelly had real support, he would be consistently over 50%, and the undecideds would be votes that you could see coming back to him. That neither is true. He hasn't been consistently over 50%, and the undecideds are an overwhelmingly group that's going to vote for Masters just by their name. If they're undecided now and they think Joe Biden is a disaster, they're not voting for the Democratic incumbent come election day. And I think you
Yeah.
combine those factors, and Arizona has cleaned up not everything, but a lot of their election aspects. So 2020 won't be able to be repeated in 2022 in Arizona. In some
Yeah.
other states, a little more risk, but it's not going to happen in Florida. It's not going to happen. It won't happen as bad as it did before in Georgia. They had some election law reform there. Arizona is a state that passed election law reform as well. Those are states that you add that factor, and I just don't see the Democrats holding. I think the biggest question to me are the more reach states, Murkowski in Alaska. What's
She may have
happening?
sealed her own doom, trying to save her in a primary, trying to save her own ass in a primary at the risk of her entire state's economy. Because what she did was risk throwing the state of Alaska to a Democrat. And by the way, when I was arguing this a few months ago, everyone was calling me crazy. Peltola won. All right. This is exactly what I was talking about. Ranked choice voting was her scheme, coupled with the establishment and a bunch of losers in the Libertarian Party who couldn't win a damn election to save their life. So they threw the will of 60+% of the voters in Alaska. They flushed it down the toilet. And by the way, I understated what I was talking about before in Arizona. I can't wait to see what our new poll finds. But look at this right here. I know it's kind of difficult to see, so I'll read it. But Kelly was ahead by about 3 point something. Let me just look at it. Kelly was ahead 3.1. It wasn't a big lead at all. But look at Senate vote preference by Biden's approval. So if you strongly approve of Joe Biden among undecideds, that only makes up 4.1% of the remaining undecided vote. All right. If you are undecided in the Senate race, then 54% of you strongly disapprove of the job Joe Biden's doing. Another 22% somewhat disapprove. Robert, that's actually worse than in some of the other states we've polled. That means almost 80% of the undecided vote doesn't like Joe Biden.
Yeah, exactly. These are people who,
in the history of when has that vote gone to the president's candidate? In the history
it makes
of freaking never.
undecided. Yeah, it makes sense they're undecided now. Blake Masters mostly unknown.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
becoming known. He's totally new to politics.
That was a while ago,
number
too.
one,
It was July.
He's coming out of a contested primary. Number three, he's getting bashed all the time on TV and doesn't have any money up himself. The fact they're still undecided tells you that means Kelly's already lost them. And they're just coming to terms with voting for Masters. But that's why I think
look at the enthusiasm. Yeah.
Oh, the enthusiasm gap is going to be massive in terms of turnout. We've seen that in voter registration,
40. Yep.
primary participation, political self-identification, and affiliation polls. Everything is all the recent history says Republican sweep. The issues that are dominating the electorate say Republican sweep. The primary participation says Republican sweep. Voter registration says Republican sweep. Party identification and self-identification and affiliation says Republican sweep. And if you dig into the polls that Richard's doing, they also say Republican sweep. It's just knowing that why are the voters undecided that are undecided? What do they think about Biden? What do they think about Democrats on the economy and these core issues? Which issues matter most to them? And it all comes back. It's going to be a Republican hammer come the fall. I mean, the only question, I think Colorado is a lost cause. I despite some close polling, I still think Washington, because of the dominance of Seattle, is a lost cause. Maybe the eastern part of the state will really, surprise.
Well, we'd expect it to be closer, though, Robert, right? So Trafalgar gets hammered the other day for that poll, but the truth is Patty Murray only got 52% of the primary vote share. Your buddy Sean Trendy argued for years about the predictive value of Washington primary two-party vote, and he's shilling like a villain this year, pretending like he didn't write this for years.
Well, he admitted that if it holds up again, Republicans will win by 3 to 4 points in the generic ballot. Which is about what? Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to end up being 5 or 6 by election day, just because Democrats are not doing anything to salvage themselves. It's just getting worse, and they're burying and build themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. And so now New Hampshire is a state. When I was up there, I didn't realize how many Bostonians,
swingy though,
how many,
but it's still swingy.
Vermonter types have moved into that state.
Oh, right in Manchester. Yeah,
it's bad. So I think I'm not sure Republican. It's not. I don't think it's the old New Hampshire I grew up in. So I don't know how competitive it could be. If Sununu had run,
Little
I think he would've
suspicious
won.
though. Little suspicious though that two polls so far polled the generic ballot for the state legislature, which is overwhelmingly voting Republican, and yet they left the Senate ballot off the questionnaire. It made me very why would you do that? Unless Baldac is closer and you don't want to show that. And overall, talking about, we did this a lot in 2020, and I used to get a lot of questions about this. People would say, why do you and Robert only care about extremely enthusiastic? Here's a great example of why Robert and I only care about extremely. In the Arizona poll, nearly every single voter who said they were extremely enthusiastic to vote also reported being certain to vote and had the vote history to back it up. 97.4%. All right, that compares to just 55.7% who were moderately enthusiastic. So when you look at Masters leading by 7 among those who are extremely enthusiastic to vote, it tells you that the likely voter model is going to help Masters disproportionately, significantly. He could cut 3 points, no problem. No problem. And in a midterm like this, where I think Robert and I are right about Kerry Lake, and it's not a walk away, but it's a pretty nice win for Kerry Lake, then that's a bad time for Mark Kelly, because folks, they're going to vote Republican at the generic ballot. They're going to vote for Kerry Lake at the gubernatorial level. You're telling me they're going to not vote Republican? There'll be a difference, but it's not going to be like this ridiculous Suffolk poll that came out the other day. Hobbs and Kerry Lake are tied, but Masters down by 11 or something. That's never going to happen. And by the way, you get bad data like that, it's your job as a pollster to tell your client, this was a crappy poll. We shouldn't release this. I'm sorry. I'll give you a deal the next time. I don't know what to tell you, but this is bad data and it shouldn't be released. It's Robert, could you imagine? I mean, this is not like we have a Steve Ducey-like incumbent here. That's not what's happening. These are all open contests, with the exception of Kelly being incumbent. I'm talking about like between the gubernatorial vote share, typically outperforms Republicans. Outperforms the Senate candidate. It's not the other way around. I just don't, everyone is asking us to believe in these miracles. I mean, they would be electoral miracles. It's never happened before, and it's not likely to happen again.
Kelly's not the kind of candidate. He's not, unlike Sinema, his colleague from Arizona in the Senate. Smart. He has chosen not to carve out an independent reputation in the state. Yeah. And this is a state that has only bucked the trend when you have carved out an independent image, and he's blown it in the last several years. And so you add it all up. Masters also is a very charismatic candidate. And once he gets his message out there, he'll be just fine. He's not Martha McSally, who always underperformed and was an establishment hack.
Yeah, she was.
Peter Thiel likely will step in with some cash. So will Trump, because the media.
Apparently, he is.
The media made the mistake of highlighting how neither one was spending money yet for Vance and in the general election for Vance and Masters. That was a mistake. That just accelerated their timetable to make it sure to everyone else.
Two guys like that with egos like that. You say so.
Exactly. That was a mistake on their part. So I think Masters in good shape. 2-1. I think he wins. He should be a 2-1 favorite, not a 3-1 underdog, as he is in some of the betting markets. Laxalt's going to win Nevada. There's a reason why the media's not talking about that race much. It's because their internals have Laxalt up.
Laxalt's up. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I live here in Nevada, so I know what the dynamic here is as well. On top of that, Vance is safe. Johnson is safe. Uncle Festerman is not going to be the next senator from the state of Pennsylvania. And I think New Hampshire is probably the best shot for a surprise compared to.
That's what I think too. That's what I think too. That's exactly where I'm at. If anything's going to go, it's New Hampshire. It does this. You are right, though. It's not the New Hampshire of even 2010. It's not. There are a lot of liberals who have moved into that area. We can see it in the voter file. While partisanship tightened, the independent vote share is bigger than both parties, and they don't go and register as Democrats. They are independents. We have to do inference in Wisconsin. Robert, you remember years ago, since I started doing these things, you remember Wisconsin D plus 3 to 6, easy. Look at Wisconsin now. We told people it was going to be, and that's what I did wrong in my Wisconsin poll when I overstated Biden's support a little bit. We still modeled it to be a slightly Democratic electorate. The traditional exit polls had it R plus 5 in 2020. The Fox exit polls, I believe, which is a little bit different, they had it similarly, but it was still pro-Republican. And by the way, for the polls like the New York Times, they always modeled it around R plus 1, yet still managed to get Biden by 11. It's crazy. But now this model has ticked up again. What Republicans are inference anyway is Robert, it's threatening to touch 40%. So people understand what that means. It means you can get killed with independents as long as you don't get, 75-25 murdered. You could still lose independents pretty easily, but as long as your base turns out, you're going to win. That's it. And Democrats once upon a time used to be 36-38%. They're down to less than 34%. This is a big deal.
And there's nothing in the wings to save them. Escalating against Trump has backfired politically. They've already seen that in the poll reaction to him being raided. And then the January 6th narrative has never resonated, never stuck, no matter all their efforts to do so. Liz Cheney humiliated in her home state of Wyoming.
Oh, my God.
And then the Fed made clear this past week they ain't coming to anybody's rescue. They want unemployment going up, up, up. And until they see it going up, 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 even though the main reason it hasn't been going up formally is because everybody's getting 2 jobs. That's the real that labor force participation rate is still worse than it was pre-pandemic, pre-lockdowns. And the inflation impact that we predicted was going to happen is already ravaging economies across the globe. The sanctions are backfiring across the West. The Fed is committed to hiking rates, which is going to kill the housing market. And the housing market is critical to a wide range of industry and disposable income and discretionary spending in the United States. Everything is pointing towards more recession. The inverted treasury yields are reaffirming really, we were in a recession and we're probably going to continue to be one.
Yeah,
or at least another one as well. A double dip recession coming. All the political factors point towards a Republican sweep in the fall.
That's another thing they don't want to talk about. It's the economic predictive value of economic indicators. We are in a recession, no matter whether they want to say it or not. The American public knows we are because we poll them with the Public Polling Project, which, by the way, you can help us do. We need another generic ballot early October, preferably, and then at the end of October, if we really want to have maximum impact, you can do that by going to bigdatapoll.com. At the bottom, just scroll to the bottom. You'll see some of the charts we got from it, and you can contribute to the Public Polling Project there. We could use all the help we can get. Share it far and wide. Because I would really like 2 more generic ballots, Robert, because this is just crap to me. This is crap to me.
If you want
Here's ancestry with Arizona too. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if you want honest, accurate polling, that's the as we wrap up, that's where to go to support the Public Polling Project. Great information throughout 2020. Showed you how close Pennsylvania was, how close Arizona was, how close Wisconsin was. That Minnesota was out of reach because those gosh darn Swedes. Too many of them. We got to ship them back. We got to deport the Swedes back.
Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. The Norwegians weren't enough to salvage and save the state. But that Florida wasn't going to actually be that competitive on election night, that Ohio wasn't going to be competitive, that Iowa wasn't going to be competitive. All that nailed it. Richard nailed it in 2014, nailed it in 2016, nailed it in 2018, nailed it in 2020. The Public Polling Project benefited all of you, both to get public information, figure out where donations should be spent in terms of where your volunteer effort should be spent, where your public efforts, court of public opinion should be spent, but also where you can make money on the betting markets. And you can continue to follow the picks at sportspicks.locals.com, where I'll have additional political betting picks up all year.
That was, Robert, I couldn't have done it better myself. I just wanted to point out, because you did give this to me and we didn't get to go through it when we were going through Arizona. People should understand it's not the same when we're talking about the Hispanic vote. It's more like Texas than it is like California. All right. It really is. If this is white ancestry, German, outside of other and unclassified, is the largest. That's the most Republican of the European ancestries. Some of the problems they've had with educated whites has come from English ancestry. And you'd know this from the Public Polling Project, by the way, because we're the only ones who break this down. Hispanic ancestry is overwhelmingly Mexican, where we're seeing the biggest shift to Republicans at this time. Puerto Rican, 2%. That's the most liberal one, or at least the most liberal out of the larger groups. And that's not going to cut it, Robert. You know what I mean? It's just not going to cut it. And by the way, Mexicans are hard to pull.
If people have any doubts, money spent supporting Blake Masters, effort spent supporting Blake Masters will be well spent. The best evidence of that is the fact that Mitch McConnell doesn't want him in the Senate. Is the best.
That's right.
Is the best reason to send Blake Masters to the Senate.
That's exactly right. All right, Robert. Last thing, go to sportspicks.locals.com. Check out what Robert's up to. You know where to find me, as always. We'll be back when, Robert? When are we going to be back?
Next Tuesday, live.
Next Tuesday, live.
7:30 Eastern time on Rumble and YouTube. We'll be back in active.
And thanks everybody for hanging on while Rumble went off. Glad you hopped on to YouTube, Twitter, Getter, wherever. We'll be back on all of them next week. Thanks as always, my friend. I'll see you soon.
Adios.
Later.
The lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway, restless nights, coffee